Trust the Lord with all your heart and all your mind. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. God purposely puts people together. God knew that she wouldn't have the energy, but I would. I promised 100% of the time to be with this lady. So for me, being a person of faith, I said, what would Jesus do? And he would take care of his wife. The doctor there at the time, I forget the name, turns to me and says, you better get your affairs in order right away. Your wife could have a stroke at any second and die. I literally stood there the entire night holding her hand, going, what is going on? Is my wife gonna die? Is my baby gonna die? I knew God had my back, and I knew there would be a story, but I didn't know to the extent.
Half of all marriages end in divorce. According to the 2021 data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the median duration of first marriages that ended in divorce was approximately 7 years. Most people tend to get divorced in their late 20s and early 30s. And the most common reasons why people get divorced are financial issues, lack of commitment, infidelity, domestic abuse, incompatibility, substance abuse. According to the National Institute of Health, mortality rates were higher in divorcees compared to their married counterparts. And the Journal of Marriage and Family reports that living together before marriage has been linked to higher divorce rates. And having divorced friends makes divorce even more likely. Welcome to the Union Apparel Podcast. My name is Omar, and in this podcast, we share real-life stories to restore hope and point people to Jesus. And if you're wondering why the irony of me going through all these statistics and where's the hope in all this, well, the hope is in Jesus, and the hope is in the person who's bringing the hope today to this podcast is my dear friend Jim, who we're going to be getting into his story in just a moment. But before we do that, just a quick shout out to my buddy Jeff Peters for making this episode possible. Jeff is a dear friend and an owner-operator of Canadian Car and Truck Rental at the corner of Fraser Highway and 200th Street in Langley, British Columbia. So if you're in the Fraser Valley area and you need to rent a vehicle or buy one, go see my buddy Jeff. He's just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And go check him out, corner of Fraser Highway and 200th Street. All right, that being said, I'm gonna hand the mic over to my dear friend, Jim Bugg. Jim, thank you for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure.
And if you haven't guessed already, the theme of this episode is marriage. And all those stats that I listed for you earlier, Jim has defied all of those statistics. He is an exception to everything that I just mentioned. And you know, in all of I've known Jim now for what were we saying yesterday? Almost 20 years now. And the one thing I want to say about Jim is that in all the years that I've known him, I've never heard this man complain. Like, you know, we unburden ourselves when we have something on our minds, but I've never heard him complain. And I'm grateful that he has chosen to be here today. And it's very timely because yesterday Jim's celebrated his 27th wedding anniversary. So how timely is this episode? So Jim, Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So Jim, as we get into your story, I'm going to have you start wherever you want to start. But I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about how Jim and I met. In a previous life, me and my wife, we used to teach swing dancing. And we met at a boardroom many, many years ago because a friend of ours brought us together because we wanted to bring a jazz festival to Langley.
Yep.
And that's where I met Jim first. So Jim is a musician, and he does a lot of other fun stuff, which he's going to talk about. And so that's where we met, and we were on the committee that put on the first jazz festival in Langley. And we've been inseparable ever since.
Inseparable, yes.
So Jim, why don't you introduce yourselves to the audience, tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then let's get into your story then.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for all those kind words. It's amazing. I didn't realize I was that awesome, and I just don't think I am.
Well, I think you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We all have a journey. Everybody has a journey, and everybody's journey is going to be different. And that doesn't make anybody else special than the other. It just means different. And, the way God makes us, We all have different strengths and weaknesses in different ways. And so I never try to judge anybody based on anything that they do or try to accomplish, simply because of that. Because maybe there's no way in the world I could accomplish what they've done in their situation, right? But for me, it mostly revolves around health conditions in my family, specifically my wife. And
now, before we get into the heavy stuff, why don't you tell the audience sort of, a little bit about introduce yourself to them as to, a little bit about your background, about
the 30-second commercial.
The 30-second commercial, yeah, the elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch. Yeah, well, my name is Jim Bugg. I like holding hands and walking on the beach and talking about my feelings. No, I'm just kidding. Although I did that last night with my wife. You mentioned it was our 27th anniversary, so that actually did happen. I grew up in northern British Columbia, a very small town called Mackenzie, raised by wolves and grizzly bears and that whole thing. Moved down to Langley, 1986, which feels like a lifetime ago, and it was. And I attended a university here in town called Trinity Western University. Life-changing, just because of what it did is it kind of molded me more into what I felt I wanted to be. And you mentioned being a musician. So I went to university for music education. But I had so much fun at university that I just left and became a musician, playing lots of albums, playing with lots of people, playing in front of a lot of people. So that became my life for a while. And then this little thing called the internet came along. It's about 94. And
you're that ancient, huh?
I'm pretty old, yeah.
I was going to say, I went to Trinity as well, but I think by the time I came, you had already graduated 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's pretty funny, yeah. And, but yeah, I think, like I said, I think they had electricity when I was there and running water, so that was awesome. We didn't have to go out in the morning and get water from the pond. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, there was the big
sewer. So around mid-90s, I started, saw that the music industry, especially in Christian music industry, was changing. And I said, well, what else can I do? So I started doing this thing called the internet, making websites, doing marketing. So I've been doing that ever since in various forms, right? And I think that's partly where we connected with the Langley Jazz
Festival. Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to call it a festival, and I would have been right. And it's just a few things. Like I got married in 1997. So just before then, I was starting to do a lot of music. But then I realized that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a musician full time. I was doing that. I was teaching. I was doing that. I was teaching, playing. Like I mentioned, playing with a lot of people. And then I got married. My wife's health was not great right off the bat, and I had to make a decision at that point. Right? Do I live the dream? I hope I'm using the air quotes in the right spot. Do I live the dream of being a musician, being a rock star, that kind of thing? Or do I fulfill the promise of being there for my wife? I promised in front of all these people I would take care of her, for better or for worse. I didn't expect the for worse to start right away. Usually expect 40, maybe 50 years down the road when we're all old and can't move.
Right. But
I learned pretty quickly that she was a special lady. Her body wasn't like other people's. And we can get into that as far as what that meant. But so I made a choice to say, okay, I pivoted from being this music guy to taking care of my wife, because that's when I married her. That's what I promised her I would do.
And it's interesting because you and I have had this conversation in the past, and I very distinctly remember you mentioning exactly what you just said. I made a commitment. I took a vow, for better or for worse. Yeah. And you've demonstrated that all these years. So take me back again. You said, so you got married, and you said that your wife's health wasn't optimal even as you were getting married.
Right. So we came back from our honeymoon, and almost right away she went on disability, long-term disability. So just to give you an idea, like some of her health issues would be lupus, chronic migraines, ice pick migraines, heart problems. Heart problems didn't start right away. That happened when we decided to have kids.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that story. It's just I don't know. It's just part of our story. And some people might kind of go, well, what did you do? Well, I'll tell you what we did. And so she had a number of health issues. And so when that sort of started to show itself, being a newlywed, I'm just like, what is going on here? How can this be possible? One person has all these things wrong. But also realizing that God purposely puts people together. You know, they always hear opposites attract. Well, she's a woman, I was a man, so there's the first opposite. I'm funny, she's not. No, I'm kidding. She's learning, she's coming along, it's great. No, I tend to be silly at home, and she will tell you, if you ask her what one of the biggest things that helps, it's humor in the home. Laughter. Laughter is like a medicine. And I'm aware of that, so I try to be light at home because we're dealing with some pretty serious things with their health. And subsequently, God knew, maybe I'll say, God knew that she wouldn't have the energy, but I would. Because I'm like a squirrel on a Red Bull most times, right? For whatever reason, I don't know why. Even just before I came here today, my wife says, make sure you talk slow. Because when I get excited, I just start to go. And you have to bring me back, the whole come back. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. But it's all of these things that in my mind, as real life is going on, I'm going, okay, how do I process this, that my wife literally can't get out of bed? Like literally can't get out of bed. There were times when I would have to carry her to the washroom. There were times that I would have to carry her. Like I could tell you story after story of things, but it's a sacrificial love in the context of I promised 100% of the time to be with this lady, just like she promised me 100% of the time she'd be with me. Those were the marriage vows. And so I looked at that and I said, I didn't want to be a statistic. And what if the shoe were on the other foot? What if I wasn't able to get out of the bed or able to move? What would I expect my significant other to do? Number one thing would not be desert me and leave.
Right.
We've all heard those stories. So for me, being a person of faith, I said, what would Jesus do? Definitely not comparing myself to Jesus, but we all strive to be like Jesus, right? So what would Jesus do? And he would take care of his wife. He wasn't married, but he would take care of his wife and treat her like the bride that she is.
But you're right, but he also used the metaphor of the bride when he talked about the church.
That's true. I never thought of that.
Pretty powerful metaphor.
At the time, I never thought of that, but
so
that's kind of where it started, and I don't know how many more things because I don't know how much time we have, but I could go for days, and but I won't.
Well, yeah, no. I think these are all, and I'm sure it's a lifetime of experiences and commitment, and we're talking about, trying to squish that into an hour. So I know it's not fair, but I just wanted everybody to get a sense of, okay, so now you're married, you're on your way to being a rock star, you get married, you're in a crossroads where now, okay, my wife needs me, and my rock and roll lifestyle is going to get in the way. So you picked one.
There wasn't a lot of synergy there.
Okay.
Although my wife did say, you know what, if you decided to do that and we have kids, we get a tour bus and I'll be on the tour bus teaching the kids, school and stuff, and we would just go. So she was very supportive of whatever I decided.
Right. But you made the choice to prioritize her over the music.
Because I knew it would be easier for her.
Okay. So let's transition into, so you have two boys.
Two boys.
So let's talk about when kids...
Well, they're boys, but they're men.
Right, they are now.
It's weird. They're boys to me, but...
So when kids came into the equation, so walk me through now as now. So you're married, now you're planning on having kids.
Yeah, the first time through, we ended in a miscarriage. And I'm sure many people, or those who are watching, may have gone through a miscarriage before. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And just to see my wife crying in agony, sitting in our car saying there's been a miscarriage, that's when I first felt, I'm not in control here because there's nothing I can do. nothing I can say to my wife apart from being there and consoling her is going to change what just happened. But it was tough because we wanted to have a large family, and which is great because she loves kids. I love kids. I think kids are great until we realize they're here to take us over, take over the world.
The world needs more bugs.
Yeah, exactly. Don't get us wet. But so that was the first time. And as a result of that, that's when she had health conditions before that. But then this is when they really started to go bad because her body is different. It reacts differently to any type of stimulus. But now this is when things became serious. So she was flat in bed, perspiring every night, soaking the sheets every night for about 5 weeks, a month to 5 weeks. She could not walk, so I had to carry her to the washroom.
During pregnancy? Or
this is after the miscarriage.
Okay.
And so that was a tough and challenging time. And so then later on, we decided to keep going, and she became pregnant. And so we're excited. We're like all pins and needles, of course. Mm-hmm. So the first time where our life changed again about this is that, or through this, was she's about 8 months pregnant, and fully rotund with a pumpkin in her stomach, the whole thing, and it was around Thanksgiving, so it was the end of October-ish, 1999. Yes, I'm that old, and so my son's 24. For those of you who aren't great at math. And we had gone for a Thanksgiving dinner to a family member's and came home, and she was laying in the bed. She said, Jim, I'm a little bit tired. I want to go lay in the bed. And I said, yeah, by all means, go lay down. And so I was in the kitchen, doing dishes or something. And then she says, it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she goes, Jim, can you come here for a sec? And I go, yeah, sure, no problem. And she says, can you take my pulse? And I go, okay. Took her pulse. It was about 160. And I'm going, that seems a bit high. And so I called a little nurse's hotline there, and they said, yeah, you probably should bring her into emergency. So by the time we got into emergency, it was at 240. Now, I don't know if you know anything.
Pulse, 240?
Yes.
Okay.
Or her heart rate was 240. Sorry, my mistake. Heart rate was 240. So I don't know if you know anything about that. That's like triple what it's supposed to be for most people. And so we got in there, and it was like all hands on deck. She's put on this gurney in emergency. Her heart is beating so hard it's shaking. And she's sweating like crazy because she's just power running as fast as she can, plus more. Mm. And the doctor there at the time, I forget the name, turns to me and says, you better get your affairs in order right away. Your wife could have a stroke at any second and die. And I go, of course, you see your life flash before your eyes. First child, we've only been married for a couple of years. And I'm like, I don't want that, So I'm just standing there holding her hand. And she says, Jim, go get something to eat. Just go. I'll be okay. I'm in emergency. I'm not doing that. But my wife is, please go. So I did, and I took off at about, I was around 9 o'clock because they had tried all sorts of things to bring the heart rate and everything down, and they couldn't find anything. So at 9 o'clock, so they were back and forth with Women's Hospital, St. Paul's, all this sort of stuff, because they had never had this happen in the Langley Hospital before. 9 o'clock, they said, okay, we're going to give her this one drug. If it doesn't work within 3 hours, we have to medevac her or take her straight to Women's Hospital and do an emergency C-section. Mm. I'm like, you said a bunch of words, I don't know. You said 3 hours. So I took off. I went out, had a few words with Jesus in the car in the parking lot, say, what is going on? Mm. I can't handle this. But I did. If you ask God for strength, he gives it to you. So I drove around Langley for like 3 hours. I was just in a daze. And came back. I had gone to like a 7-Eleven, like 5 miles away. I don't know why. I brought a strawberry kiwi Snapple.
Oh, you still remember?
Oh, we know this because I still can't drink that thing. Came back to the emergency room. It was like 5 minutes to 12, so it was almost 3 hours. And also in the meantime, we didn't know this, but her parents, my wife was Norwegian, Anita. Her parents were flying back from Norway from visiting family, and they were literally in the air at this time, coming back from Norway. And Anita goes, you can't call them because they're stuck on this airplane. So I get back to emergency. I walk into the emergency. I just walked in. I didn't care what was going on. I put the Snapple down on her desk there at her little bed. She's all hooked up and beep, beep, all the sounds. And the heart rate just goes right back to normal. I'm like, huh. All of a sudden, there's all these doctors and nurses in there again. What's going on? What'd you do? I said, I brought her a Snapple, So I literally stood there the entire night holding her hand until the morning, just staring at my wife, going, what is going on? And so I'll condense this story because I could go for days. But a week, they eventually said, you can go home. If it happens again, come on in. So we did. A week later.
So the baby's good. Heart rate's back to normal.
As far as we know.
It happened within the 3-hour window that they were with that experimental.
It came back down with the experimental drug of kiwi strawberry Snapple.
Okay.
Yeah. So we go home for a week. Happens again. We bring her back.
It happens again?
Yeah. A week later. So now we know what to do. So now she's put on bed rest though in the hospital in that area. So it was the doctor wanted to induce labor. It was about that time. So the nurse comes in and says, we're going to induce labor. I'm like, great. What does that mean? We're going to take the baby before I go, dude. Because I'm a dude, man. I don't know what all these fancy words mean. Induce and labor and all this kind of stuff. So she goes, here, put these scrubs on. I go, okay. So I strip right down naked. And I put these scrubs on. I didn't know till after that you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a G. This is a G pie. What are you talking about, dude?
You're supposed to just put them over your clothes, but they were my clothes. I go into the room where the induction is it called induction?
The induction chamber.
Induction chamber.
Sure.
And so the process is starting, and I'm just standing in the corner trying to find a happy place, right?
Why'd they ask you to come in? You wanted to?
I didn't say anything. I think they just said, you're coming in. I go, all right. So I go in, and I'm standing there, and the doctor goes, you, hold her legs. I'm like, I don't want to hold her legs. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm going to be way over there in that corner. Long story short, I did hold a leg. And Riley was born, but during delivery, her tailbone snapped.
Oh, man.
And so I heard it, she heard it, and she said, Jim, something's not right. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what was going on, but I'm holding her leg, and I go, wow, you're strong like bull, because it was in the moment,
labor,
right?
Something else, yeah.
It's crazy. So Riley came out blue, and I knew that wasn't good, because I've never seen any blue people around, apart from Avatar. And so he had to be incubated. Incubated? Yes, incubated for a day. And he was fine. Riley's totally fine. But Anita's tailbone saga started. So she was bedridden from that time for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
She slept curled up in a ball on the couch because she couldn't put any pressure. So she couldn't stand for any longer than 5 minutes. She explained it like, take a broom, stick it straight up your tailbone. And that's what it felt like all the time. Mm. Right. So now we had to figure out, okay, why did her heart go bananas?
Right.
So
I'm just going to interrupt real quick here because this is, I know you enough to know that you have this wonderful way of not deflecting, but when you talk about heavy stuff, you incorporate humor into it.
Yep.
Because I don't know if that's to lessen the impact for the person you're talking to or for yourself, or I don't know. But what I want to go back to is those 3 hours where you're driving around the car because you're a man of faith. Right? And we're going to talk about how your faith played a role in your marriage and in all of the challenges that you've encountered in your life that keeps a smile on your face. But what I want to know is those 3 hours where you just said, ha, 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 I was talking to Jesus. Can you tell me a little bit more as to what that conversation was like as you're driving around? Because that's a pretty tense moment. Or tense 3 hours.
Tense 3 hours. Yeah, I remember walking to the car. It was like 9 o'clock at night in late October or mid-October. So it was a little chilly. I remember walking to the car, just standing at my car sobbing, going, is my wife going to die? Is my baby going to die? And I'm going, so, I had my come into Jesus thing, like, Jesus, like, seriously? I've done nothing but serve you my entire life, right? And when I say serve, didn't do drugs, didn't do any, all the stuff that you expect a rebel to do. I didn't do any of that. Not that I didn't have the opportunity, but I just didn't feel right. As a person of faith, I was convicted not to do that. And so I remember just driving around the streets, and I had no idea really where I was driving, but it was mostly just the Langley area. I ended up at the 7-Eleven right downtown Langley City. Wasn't great at 11:30 at night, and so I'm walking around there going, where am I? Like, where did I end up? Because I was in a fog, like a little bit, right? I was praying and crying and had music on, turned music off, cried some more, turned the music back on, because I didn't want to go back. Because it's not that I didn't want to face what was going on, but it was really the first act of, are you really sure you're married to this lady? And what are you going to do? It's really that first act of defiance on my, I'm going to call it defiance, from my perspective to the devil, saying, you're not going to mess with me. So I would say, is that all you got, devil?
Oh, no.
Is that all you got? So, and my story, as you know, there's a lot of devil throwing lawn darts at my face, right?
Right.
For lack of a better term. So that drive, I think, in many ways, in some ways, kind of defined who I was or who I am now. Because I could have just said, forget this, I'm out of this. Like,
as most people would.
Yeah. For better, for worse. Well, it's already worse. We've only been married for 2 years.
Yeah.
And, but then I realized, there are people who have other stuff. And I mentioned that earlier. Everybody's going to have a story. And who's to say mine's any worse or any better than anybody else's? Anything that happens, maybe that's, I grew up in a time where you just did what you're told. There was legalism. And if you even thought any of those things, that's Christian guilt, right? I didn't feel guilt. I felt an obligation. Like I said, I had these vows. And I said, you know what? I'm taking care of this lady by hook or by crook. Whatever I can do as a human being, as little as that may be in comparison to what God could do, without sounding too superficially Christianese, right? I knew God had my back, and I knew there would be a story, but I didn't know to the extent, right? Maybe it was being naive, and actually I'm kind of glad I was naive because I didn't have that overbearing, okay, this is coming next, better get ready.
Yeah, because sometimes being naive just helps you, I don't know, you just deal with it better.
Maybe, yeah, because I didn't, there wasn't any foreboding. I just she's my wife.
Okay, so then you get back and her heart rate comes back to normal. That's an answer to prayer, all that crying, all that. So it goes back down, comes back up, you have your first kid now. So are you working right now? What are you doing for work at this point?
I was working from home.
Okay.
Part of our dream or part of our goals when we got married is I would have a marketing company and she'd take care of all the operations and all that kind of stuff. That went out the window.
Because now you have a newborn.
Now I have a newborn. My wife can't even hold her arms up. She can't feed. She can't do anything. So I would take care of all of those things, and I'd feed child one, child A, at night, bottle feed and stuff. And I got pretty good at burping them and all that kind of stuff. It's like, bleh. So it took literally 5 seconds to burp this kid.
Right.
So, but I would stay up during the day, from 6, and I'd stay up all the way till 2 the next morning. So I'd be up 18 hours a day. I'd get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And that was for about 2 or 3 years. Meanwhile, she still has this busted tailbone. So essentially her coccyx was just kind of dangling there. It was about that long, and she couldn't function. The pain, she was on painkillers. She's been on painkillers since we've been married. Okay?
Wow.
That's 27 years. She can't go to sleep without being on painkillers. And people say, oh, that's horrible. Well, yeah, no, it's not great. But in order to function, you gotta do something.
She needs them, yeah.
Yeah. And there are times when there are even stronger painkillers. Like I mentioned earlier, she has these ice pick migraine headaches. And then it's exactly what you think it is. It's like an ice pick in your coconut. And so for 30 seconds, she's just like this. The good thing is it just goes into a regular migraine. So she'll be sitting in the living room with all the lights out, wearing my dark sunglasses, and just sitting in there in the quiet. So there's all these sorts of things. So
you're running your business.
Yeah.
You're taking care of a newborn. You have a wife who's incapacitated.
Yeah.
In the sense of, she's bedridden for the most part. And you're not getting enough sleep. Man, those reasons I read earlier,
I was living the dream, man. It
financial
was
issues,
awesome.
lack of commitment, like the pressure. It feels like the pressure cooker is getting like it's the pressure. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure at this point. So tell me then, what happens now? Are you feeling like you're cracking? Or are you still like the superhuman individual who's how's your relationship with God at this point? What do you?
Well, to be honest,
What's going on up here?
There's not a lot of time for anything else.
Okay.
We still went to church. I was still heavily involved in church. Being a musician, I was on the worship team and stuff.
Okay.
Anita wasn't able to necessarily get to church as much as I could, so she would stay home with Marcus. And times when she could make it, she would come, but it was not easy.
You said Marcus.
Oh, I meant Riley.
Riley.
Oh, kid A.
Where's the second kid?
No,
Tell me
that's
when the
coming. Yeah.
Okay, that's coming. So we're not here yet. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a 5-year gap.
Okay. So
I was pretty heavily involved. Anita was at one time as well, but she couldn't be involved. She couldn't stand on the stage, do any of that sort of stuff. So I would do all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the shopping, all the laundry, all the feeding.
Yeah.
She would feed with a bottle when she's able to do it, but she'd have to be all propped up so her arms could, the whole thing. So you asked what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, isn't this what a husband's supposed to do? I promised this lady I'd take care of her. I'm not saying every moment was joyous and, let the bells ring and the banners fly, but I'm going, I made a promise to her I'd take care of her. I made a promise to people in the audience at the wedding that I would take care of her. And I made a promise in front of God and my pastor. Reverse that around. In front of my pastor and then to God. And I'm always thinking, I don't want to be a statistic. Who am I to say, yeah, no, I'm out, just because I had a few hard times? Everybody has hard times.
Yeah, that's more than a few hard times, though.
But for me, I didn't really think that there were grounds for anything to happen. Okay. My Bible, I have a Bible verse or 2 verses that I live by. And doesn't mean it's always, woohoo, I got a Bible verse, but it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And a lot of people will know this. Trust the Lord with all your heart and all your mind. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. So that went with which doctors to go to, because we've been to countless doctors. There was one doctor, we started an appointment at 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. We didn't get out of there till like 1 a.m. It was like a 9-hour appointment. She's taken notes, 25 pages of notes. And so when I had to go get her records for some certain medical procedures, they came out on like a dolly, boxes and boxes of records from this one doctor. And to me, when you say going through the motions, I did in a sense because this is what I thought I was supposed to do. I made a promise to this lady, and it was an oath.
Well, that's admirable because, most people one of those things need to happen for people to just go, okay, I'm bailing, I'm out of here. So now all this going on, and then you guys decide to add another person to your family.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of deciding happening, just like, let's go. And so similar things happened with this pregnancy, almost 8 months.
You guys were both on the same page with having another?
Of course,
okay,
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We wanted to have a big family, but now we knew kind of how Anita's body reacted to stress, and that's where the lupus came in and that kind of stuff. So physically, her body was not great. But we said, you know what? This is in God's hands. So 8 months pregnant again. I'm not going to get into the gory details, but we're sitting at home and there was definite medical distress happening, and we thought she was going into a miscarriage at 8 months.
Oh, man.
So call an ambulance. Just, where are we? Well, we go to the Langley Hospital. Ambulance comes, picks us up. Go to the hospital. And our doctor, I think at that time, he was at Whistler for things.
That's a ski resort for those that don't know.
Yeah, Whistler, north of Vancouver here. The Olympics were there 2010. Go Canada. That's because the Olympics are on right now and I'm watching Olympics. Right. Anyway.
So doctor's on vacation in Whistler while this medical emergency is
So within
happening.
45 minutes, he's in the Langley Hospital.
Okay.
That's how fast he drove. So he did a few exams that I won't repeat, but I almost put him through a wall. because my wife was just screaming. And he says, we got to take her to Women's Hospital. I do not know what's happening. So we hop in the ambulance and away we go. Drive to Women's Hospital. No, I think it was St. Paul's. It was one of those, either St. Paul's or the Women's Hospital, probably the Women's Hospital. Because now that we're 8 months pregnant, we're considered high risk because of previous. So during this time, I think it was 2 or 3 times a week, we'd have to drive to the Women's Hospital in Vancouver from Langley and back.
So that's a 50-minute drive, right? 45 to 50-minute drive?
Yeah, especially if there's traffic. So 3 times a week, we drive there and come back. And all sorts of specialists and everything, and it was fantastic care once we're there. But it was a lot of extracurricular stuff happening, right? Not just being pregnant, but just all the stuff that we had to do. So now we're at this place where being not flown, the ambulance is flying.
Sure.
Yeah. I asked him if he could put on the siren. He wouldn't do it. I said, come on, how many times do I get to sit in the front seat of an ambulance? He wouldn't do it. So we get to the hospital, and they do a bunch of tests. As it turns out, at 8 months pregnant, she had severe kidney stones. So bad that she was bleeding. And I don't know different sizes, but I think they were like 11 millimeters or 13, something like that. So that's high.
Yeah, it's a sizable.
Yeah. So here's the thing: 8 months pregnant, she has severe kidney stones. You can't do anything. So she had to suffer for another month in agony. And then after she had a C-section, because this time we decided to have a C-section because she didn't have a tailbone. Then she had to go get it all laser blasted out. So now she has continuing kidney stone issues, but not nearly as bad as it was. So that's nice.
And this is sounding very Job-esque to me.
Well, there was a time that I kind of go, hey, I've heard about this before. Where was it? Oh, yeah, it was in the Bible. It's that Job guy.
It was also at 7-Eleven where you said to the devil, hey, is that all you got?
Yeah. So I stopped saying that. So because I realized devil will not tempt you, but he'll test you.
Right.
And I didn't think it was God testing. Well, at times I thought it was God testing me. Just how serious are you about this oath that you gave your wife? And the devil's like, let me see what I can do.
Just wants a little crack, right? To get in there and mess things up.
So
second kid is born C-section, normal, everything is, baby's good?
Well, as far as I can tell, so far, he's 19, yeah.
Okay.
He's a fantastic kid. Both my boys are fantastic boys, or at least I say boys, because they are boys. 24 and 19. And one of the cool things about, because I tried to model to my boys what it means to be empathetic, what it means to care for people. So all the report cards all through school, the teachers would always say they're always the first one to help a kid who's crying. Thank you, they're so kind, holding doors. I taught my boys this because I take that kind of stuff seriously. Do I wish I could have been better? Definitely. But, one funny story is that when they were little, Anita would be sitting on the couch, she's not able to do anything, the boys would be crawling on her. And I would go, guys, what is mom? A flower. Do you jump on flowers? No, so then they'd get off. And so she was never able to go on the floor and play with them. So I know that she has regrets that way. My bride is an amazing lady. And I know, we were talking earlier with Shannon, that she has guilt. And to my knowledge, she would have to tell me, I tried never to make her feel guilty at all. I said, this is just what it is. And we just have to go and move forward. But we've gone through a ton of stuff because of her health. I had to declare bankruptcy, and not the Michael Scott bankruptcy, actual bankruptcy.
You had to declare bankruptcy throughout all of this ordeal because you can't pay as much attention to your business as you're dealing with all this other
100%.
stuff. 100%.
I did work at I did have a few actual jobs. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. We were paying the bare minimum of things. So in my mind, financially, I'm going, we're never going to get anywhere. And it's ironic you brought up finance, the first thing that you said about, that was a big challenge. So we had to declare bankruptcy. It took me 10 years to come to that realization. Once I did, it was like a weight lifted off.
So you declare bankruptcy in the process, and now this huge weight is lifted. So, Jim, I'm going to, it really isn't fair because these are all really heavy subject matters. And So it would be a disservice to just kind of skim through all of this. But I also know your wife. I don't know her as well as you do, but I know she's a wonderful lady. Always a smile on her face. You guys are just so wonderful together. So you've gone through all of this stuff. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about how your faith impacted absolutely everything, because there's challenges after challenges after challenges. And I'm sure you've read Job, you've read the Bible, you've read God's promises, all of this stuff. Yeah. So tell the audience, because divorce is rampant. Mm-hmm. People are going through all kinds of stuff. You've named like at least 10 things, only one of which can cause a divorce. So walk me through how your faith helped you navigate this very difficult, these very difficult times, and how it continues to do so.
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, my wife, my bride, I find it weird calling her my wife. She's my bride. Mm. I mean, I could be very frank with one comment, and I remember it very succinctly. I was in church one day, and these were people that knew what we were going through, all this kind of stuff. I was talking to a guy, and he says, man, I would have gone a long time ago. I'm going to be very frank, so pardon the language. And I said, well, that's the difference between you and me, is I have a set of balls and you don't. And he's just like, whoa. And I didn't mean that in an ego way. I meant that from do what you're supposed to do. That's just all in my head. That's all I'm thinking. I'm supposed to be taking care of her. And so my wife is a prayer warrior. And
now, what does that mean for those that have no idea what that means?
What a prayer warrior is? She prays about everything.
Okay.
So for years, like 12 years, she headed up at our kids go to a Christian school here in Langley called Langley Christian School. She started the prayer chain. So for 12 years, she headed up every week. She'd send out prayers to everybody, pray, get together every week for, I think it was 12 years when our boys were there. She said she now works there, ironically, but she prays about everything. Pray without ceasing. And this goes back to I call it an oath with God. When you make that commitment to Jesus, where he's taken over your life, there are certain things he expects, right? Praying is one of them. You know, you don't have a friend and never talk to him. Like you and I, if we never talked, we wouldn't be friends. Right. I wouldn't have a clue who you are. So that's what praying is, right? You're talking to God about day stuff. For me, I pray unceasingly. So I'll be driving, oh, there's a homeless guy on the road. Pray for that guy. No idea who he is, but he's not having his best day. Ambulance goes by. Oh, I'm sure that's, again, somebody's not having their great day. So it's about taking that seriously, meaning taking the relationship you have with God seriously. It's not just a bunch of rules and regulations. The 10 Commandments are part of it. Yeah, those are rules. But it's about having a personal relationship and understanding what it means to have this relationship. I've gone to church pretty much my entire life. Easy for me to say. However, I have a lot of friends that are not people of faith, and I get them asking me questions. So for me, every opportunity I can, without taking a Bible and whacking somebody on the head with it, I talk to people about Jesus, and that could be just by simply how I'm talking with them. Not even talking about Jesus, just they can just tell something's different. You don't tell crude jokes when you're in a crowd. There's no swearing and all the stuff that people say, oh, it's just one word. You know what? I don't feel right saying it. I don't feel right, I never would call my wife down or speak ill of her in any way. We have social media, for example. Just some of the things these people say about their marriage and all that kind of stuff, it breaks my heart. I would never say anything negative about my wife.
So then would you say that everything, how you are with your wife, is an outflow of your relationship with Jesus? And if you didn't have that relationship, you might not be the person that you are?
I would say 100%.
Okay.
And mostly because I love her so much, right? And mostly because I love God so much. And yeah.
So speaking of God, so we're gonna start to bring this 747 to a landing, which isn't fair because we went from like here to whatever. Like this is a big flight. Your life there's a lot. It's very multifaceted. So I wanna talk real quick now for viewers that are Christian viewers, I mean, divorce is rampant even in Christian circles. So no one is really immune from this. So if there's if somebody was watching right now and they're having some challenges, and if you had to give them like, a hack, like, here's the top 3 things you can do to resuscitate your marriage, or to like, whatever, impart some wisdom from your experience onto the audience.
Good question.
Specifically when it comes to your marriage, and I'm going to get to the spiritual part in just a second.
Okay, well, I would say, it's kind of funny, but I would say communication is number 1. What we used to do in our marriage, and sometimes we still do it, but we have fun. I have fun with it, and she just realizes who I am, so she just has to put up with it. But communication would be number 1. So we used to do this. I think I just repeated myself, but she would say something, and then she'd say, "Okay, now what did you hear?" So then I would say what I thought she meant, and she says, "That's not what I meant at all." So there's a lot of presuppositions on both sides about what the other person is thinking or saying, but you actually have to communicate so you understand.
So you're making sure you're on the same page. So you're not just
right.
Okay.
And none of the go ask your mom, go ask your dad stuff. Don't do that. You don't play one off the other. So that's when kids are coming in, because what that does is that undermines any type of respect or authority or anything like that. I know those might be bad words nowadays, but I don't care. So you said 3?
No, it doesn't have to be 3. I just arbitrarily picked 3. It could be just 1. Communications. I guess that'll take care of a lot of things, right? If we just communicated better.
Because if there's 3, I could talk for days.
No, I know. All right. So finally now, Jim, I know that we talk a lot about God. We talk a lot about Jesus.
Yeah.
Our entire worldview is being filtered through this biblical lens. So somebody's watching right now, and they're going, "You know what, Jim? I love what you said. It makes sense. I'm kind of feeling like, I want to get to know this Jesus. What do I got to do?" So why don't you, lay it out? Like, what are the 10 steps they have to follow to get
steps.
to, or whatever, 15 steps, 20,
It's
whatever.
climbing higher.
What do they have to do to get to know Jesus? What do they got to do to have the peace that you enjoy in the midst of your storms? All these troubles coming your way, and you have this beautiful way of encountering these challenges, and I know it comes from Jesus because I experience it as well. So tell them what they need to do to experience the peace that you experience on a day-to-day basis.
Well, first of all, it's about understanding that nobody's ever perfect, and God doesn't care what you've done, have done, or whatever. He just wants this. What is this? That's who you are as a person. He wants your heart, and what that means is you kind of recognize that I can't do this on my own. And I realized that a long time ago. I grew up in a Christian home. Faith didn't really become faith until I was older. I followed all the rules, but it's a personal relationship. And what does it mean, a personal relationship? Just to what I alluded to earlier, you talk. And that's what prayer is.
So this person right here, right now listening.
Oh.
So you can talk directly into the camera to talk to the audience. What do they have to do to enjoy the peace that you enjoy?
The actual steps is you ask Jesus into your heart.
And how do we do that?
And what do you do that? You just recognize that you've been a sinner. And what is a sinner? Well, you haven't been following Jesus. That's essentially what a sinner is, right? And you say, "Jesus, come into my heart. I release everything to you. I want to live for you." And that's really as simple as it is.
So, Jim, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. I know these were some really heavy topics, and one of the things that's really difficult for us as men is to make ourselves vulnerable like this, to share the innermost part of our lives. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for sharing your struggles and your challenges. Who knows who you're going to be an encouragement to who's watching this. So thank you for being here. And so just a quick note before we sign off, guys, if you resonated with Jim's message, if you want to send him a message, Jim's he has a marketing company as well. He does some wonderful things in social media. So if you want to get in touch with him, I encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm told that this is how these videos get out. So consider subscribing, liking the video, sharing some comments. I will put Jim's information down there if you want to reach out to him directly. That would be wonderful as well. So I just want to thank you all for joining, and we'll see you guys all in the next episode.